Hi, volleyball fans, and welcome back to Volley Talk, the podcast created for volleyball lovers who want to dig deep into what is going on in NCAA and international volleyball. I'm your host, Sarah Pavin. I'm an Olympian, beach volleyball world champion, former Nebraska Cornhusker, and longtime pro, both indoor and on the beach.
And I'm Adam Schultz, former indoor player, international volleyball coach, and the show's resident stat guy.
It is VNL week, everybody.
Giddy up.
Week 1 of VNL kicks off Tuesday, June 3rd. The women's teams are going first, which means that the men's teams are following close behind next week. This week's episode will be similar to last week's, but we're going to preview the men's tournament and how things are looking on that side, what our predictions are, what we can expect, etc. Admittedly, we are not as well versed in the men's side as the women's.
Fortunately, the U.S. aren't bringing back any of their old players, and there are a lot of college players, which we just finished watching, so we should have some things to talk about.
Perfect. Okay. We are excited to dive in, so let's get started. Okay, to start things off this week, we have some Love Season 2 signings. Love has been posting about the athletes that have signed with the league as they come in. So the ones we have so far, and I would say the headliner so far, is Carol from Brazil.
I love how the Brazilians just have one name. I say Carol, you know who I mean. That's it, Carol.
Exactly.
But that is a big pickup for them.
Pickup.
She's great internationally. She's played for top teams. She's getting a little bit older, but still kind of in her prime and competing. That's a very good pickup for them.
I was surprised to see that, actually.
Well, and I mean, you told me why, so the reasons kind of make sense.
Well, I was speculating why. Her partner in Buis, I think that's how you say it, I'm not sure. The Dutch outside also signed. Those two have been together for quite a while, but have not really played in the same country or leagues that often. So when I saw that both of them signed, I was like, okay, this makes sense. They kind of maybe want to spend a season in the same place.
And she's not on the VNL roster, so I'm not sure if she's done playing internationally, but it's a nice way to continue playing while being together. So makes a lot of sense.
Bri O'Reilly, the setter for Canada, signed. We have a bunch of Canadians that have signed, actually. Alexa Gray, that's a big pickup.
Yeah.
She went to BYU, has been playing the last few years for top teams in Turkey and Italy.
Yeah.
So big pickup there. Jazz White, another Canadian, played at Michigan State. Andrea Mitrovic, another one, played at Buffalo and Arizona State. So the Canadians are slowly making their way. LMA Powell, who is on the VNL roster this summer, she signed. Callie Schwarzenbach, former player for Nebraska, Long Beach State, just won the Brazilian Superliga. Aneka Legros, she played at Coastal Carolina. She's recently been playing in Switzerland and France. We have a Colombian opposite who signed, Ivani Montano. Jess Robinson, she played for Michigan, recently started playing pro in France. Argentina Ong is Mexican. You might remember her from this past NCAA season playing for Arizona State. She played the second half of the season for Scandicci in Italy. And Giulia San Giacomo, she played for Santa Clara and Northwestern and just finished her first pro season in Turkey. So we've got a mixture of some young athletes who are pretty fresh out of college with one season, maybe two under their belt professionally. And then we've got some veterans and some players who have a ton of experience in Alexa Gray, Bri O'Reilly, Carol, and players like that. So good mix.
What's your initial take on those signs? Obviously, they're not done. We have players coming back. You know, we talk about the caliber of the league. looking at that list and what they put out so far, what's your instinct? Are we looking more skilled, more physical than last year, similar? What's your early but gut feel?
Well, my first feel when I see these, and I think that this is for sure not the end of the signings, I'm like, okay, what is the turnover like in Love? Like, you're not going to keep adding players like this. So I'm wondering who from season 1 has decided to leave.
It's kind of like a reality TV show.
Yeah. Like, I know we probably have a couple retirements, but you're not, with only 6 teams in the league, you can't keep bringing in players. Like, some are going to have to go. So that was my first thought, is like, who is leaving? My second thought, when you're bringing in players like Cadol, Bree, and Alexa Gray, it gives me hope that the level is going to increase. But again, those are only 3 players. But those 3 players, I think, can make a difference. So it is encouraging to see players of that level make the commitment.
I like seeing Alexa Gray there. I think she's automatically going to be one of the top outsides in the league, probably. Cadol, lots of international experience. I find it interesting that they're starting to bring in more setters. Like, that was kind of, you had a crop of American setters who were maybe on their way out. I'm curious to see which of those stay, who's still playing, or whether, like, I have a hard time believing Bree's going to be a backup somewhere.
No. I would be shocked.
You know, but when you look at the setters from this season, they were all kind of American staples.
Well, I was wondering which ones are going to take a back seat.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, Sage and Carly, which one is leaving? Because I'm pretty sure Bree signed with Austin. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100%. But when you have, like, the teams that had the duo already, like you saw Fairbanks and Bug together. As I said, Lloyd and Sage together. I'm curious how those dynamics are going to work. If they're going to move players from the teams they were in last season and just kind of mix it up. Like, I'm very curious to see how that goes.
Yeah. But overall, I think good moves for them. And, you know, they need
good for Love.
Yeah, they need to keep picking off players like Cadol, like Alexa Gray, with experience, who are still physical and kind of in the prime of their career.
Well, because I think Cadol you could compare to Bia, but better.
Yeah.
Like, similar situation, Bia just isn't as good as Cadol.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like players that are in that age. Alexa and Bree are a little on the younger side, but yeah, very cool stuff. We'll keep you posted on any more signings that we see. The VNL Week 1 rosters are out for women, obviously. The tournament starts on Tuesday. So this week's matches are happening in Beijing, Ottawa, and Rio. We have received a lot of messages about the American Week 1 roster. So we just wanted to address it before we got into the men's side. I think it's fair to say this isn't a great roster. We have 10 players on that list out of 14 that are making their VNL debuts.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. So the 4 players on the roster who do have VNL experience are Maddie Skinner, Ronnie Jones-Perry, Morgan Hentz, and Zoe Jarvis. The other 10 have none. So this will be interesting. I think my biggest concern is just the lack of experience. Not from an on-court perspective. That is a separate thing for me. But, like, normally when you're traveling and things are brand new and it's just like a new experience, kind of overwhelming, you want a couple older or more veteran athletes there to kind of like hold down the fort from like an emotional perspective, and like not even that they have to play, but just to be there to be a steady influence of like, this is how this works, this is what we're doing, this is normal, things like that. I was kind of surprised to see that there wasn't really any of that, because even the players that have VNL experience, I would say Morgan Hentz is the most experienced out of all of them, and even then it's like, yeah.
Well, and I've engaged in a few conversations and I've seen some dialogue this past week of people saying, Well, it doesn't really matter because the U.S. is going to get the number 1 seed in the Olympics in 2028. Like that's just going to happen. So the next 4 years don't really matter, essentially, is the conversation. And I very much disagree with that. I think that you find the U.S., and we'll talk about this on the men's side, but both on the women's and the men's side, in a period of transition for their rosters. And, in fairness, we don't know which women are going to play Worlds at the end of the summer and who's coming back. So I think that will be very telling. But from a standpoint of creating a culture and expectation and passing down the knowledge that your program has had, you can't do that when you have all new players. Like, to throw a whole bunch of people into one team who don't really know what's going on or who haven't played internationally, you're learning how to travel, you're learning how to compete in a different situation. You haven't had a ton of time together. You don't have any leaders who know what's going on. Like, it's really hard to pass that culture on. So now you're expecting people to raise their level without kind of anybody leading the way. And I just think it's really hard to do that without experience. And that's my concern with the young roster. Not that they need to get experience, they need to try it, but who is kind of guiding that? And you have a new coaching staff. Like, everything about this is new. And that's the kind of question mark or concern for me.
Well, and for me, it's like, it doesn't matter. They're going to be the number 1 seed. Like, when I hear comments like that, it's just like, you clearly have never played high-level sport before, because, like, if you are really a competitor, it always matters.
Well, the expectation for the
U.S. It
US...
always matters. And the expectation, like, the U.S. has laid down expectations of medaling
always.
Or winning a gold medal always. So it always matters. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry. Just at the end, we'll get the result we want and we'll be the number 1 seed. So who really cares? It's like, no, if you're a true competitor and you're a program that expects excellence, you're pushing for those wins all the time. And I understand, like Adam said, there is a transition, but like, that is not the attitude that you expect from programs like that.
Well, and the other thing to think about too, and this has nothing to do with volleyball, but the programs from an Olympic standpoint generally receive funding in at least partly in their results and how they do at world championships and things like that. So you can't just stink until the Olympics. You can't just
say, oh, who cares? Because, funding depends on a lot of
there's
different
program
factors.
Expectations and things like these next 2 years, like, they're not throwaway years. You can't just try and get experience. Like, you have to see what these new players are and perform at the same time. It's a tricky balance.
Well, and I understand that coaches can't control what players want to do with their lives.
Sure.
They can't control, if they want to break, if they are retiring. Like, those are variables that just happen. But just looking at this roster in particular, like, for example, a Danielle Coutinho, she has been through several cycles. Do I think that she should necessarily play? No. But I think having her experience and being able to share her knowledge and stuff like that is an asset. So it's like things like that I'm like, I find interesting with this roster. But that being said, there are some reasons why this happened.
Some extenuating circumstances.
So as I said, we got a ton of messages being like, what the heck is up with this roster? This is not going to go well. I don't disagree with you. But from our sources, this is secondhand, so we're not like 100% sure about this, but from what we've heard, here is the deal of why this happened. Jenna Gray and Rachel Fairbanks are injured. Okay, so that's why we're seeing Sage and LMA Powell on the setting list. Mackenzie Adams and Allie Franti also injured. Avery Skinner and Kalia Lanier haven't shown up to training yet, so they were probably given some extended time off after their pro season. Dana Retke just arrived in California to train this week, which probably not enough to then turn around and go to VNL right away. And then Lexi Rodriguez's sister is getting married. Okay, so with all of those things going on, the players that are technically available who weren't selected are Jordan Poulter, Breon Butler, Taylor Mims, Amber Igede, Asia O'Neal, Danielle Catino, Lauren Brezenio, Tia Jimerson, and Steph Samity.
And that's not to say, like, this is the information we had. That's not to say other people aren't injured or banged up or whatever.
This is what we have heard, and we're just sharing it with you guys. But
if you're assuming all things are equal and those players were available, what surprises does that leave you with?
I'm like, where's Jordan Poulter?
Fair.
Like, what is she doing this week? I think that she is a veteran. She is in a position that could influence a lot of what happens this week, being a setter, obviously.
She automatically stabilizes that roster.
Yes. So I'm wondering where the heck she is. I think Breon Butler, I'm kind of wondering where she is, because while she might not have a lot of international experience, she has been playing pro for a little while. And so I'm thinking that she could have potentially been an asset. Danielle Catino, I already mentioned my reason for her of where I'm wondering where she is. But the word on the street is that Logan Lednicki and Olivia Babcock were just the highest performing opposites in training. So if you're a Samity fan or things like that, that apparently is the reason why those two were picked. But I would say like even Asia O'Neal has a bit of experience. The big one for me is Poulter.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting to watch this roster perform this week. You have, for a lot of these young kids who are out there for the first time, if you get a chance to play, it's going to be intense and nerve-wracking. These are your chances to prove that you belong in the gym when the world's roster comes along. For the rest of the years, like, you are in tryouts this whole summer for a potential spot. And I'm just curious to see how they deal with the pressure, how they deal with the new team, how they deal with new opponents who are bigger, physical, more experienced. I'm very excited to watch them play this week.
Well, and they don't have an easy week either, because they've got Italy and Brazil in their grouping, and Italy is showing up basically with their Olympic roster. So
it'll be kind of...
I think Brazil's missing Gabi this week, but yeah.
It'll be a good test for these kind of young professionals to see where they stack up against good competition.
So there you go. That is kind of the explanation of why this roster is the way it is. And yeah, we'll let you know some games that we're excited about at the end of the episode.
All right, so moving into the men's VNL roster. Last week we went over how VNL works. So if you didn't listen to that episode and you have some questions about the format, it's the same for the men and women, but they just alternate weeks. So give last week's episode a listen. All of the information is there. Again, this is a little bit of a repeat, but as the host country for the next Olympics, the U.S. automatically gets a berth and is automatically ranked number one.
Which apparently, who cares then? No, just kidding. I'm being a jerk.
So if we look at the men's VNL roster compared to the Olympic roster, the men are in a very similar spot to the women in terms of they are returning far fewer players from their Olympic roster than any other country.
Well, I think the men and the women are returning the same number.
We got 3 returning men's athletes from the last Olympics. So we have Jendrik coming back, who's a middle blocker. We have Ma'a setting for them, but apparently, like, he's coming back, so he's there. I'm assuming he's gonna be setting. He was the backup last year, so yes, on the team, but didn't play a ton. And then we have the lifelong libero in Eric Shoji back for another twirl. So
another twirl. The alternate too.
Yeah, and back. The alternate.
So like kind of 4 came back and sing on the right side.
And so there's not going to be a lot of experience on the men's roster. And just for a little context, we'll go over some of the other countries who we're expecting to be good and how many players they're returning. So Brazil returning 6. Now they've turned over their setter and a couple key players, but they've still got experience on the roster. So we'll see what they end up looking like.
They've turned over some lifers.
Yeah.
In Bruno, in Lucas, Leao's gone.
Yeah.
So, like, those are some
They've been around the program for a long time.
But they are definitely in their late 30s, so I'm not shocked.
And then Argentina's returning 8. Canada also returning only 5. So a little bit of roster turnover for Canada. France returning 12. So they're going to be good.
I thought Engapeth would call it quits. No, the man is father time. He just keeps coming back. The only player that France lost is Tilly. I mean, good player, but that whole team is back.
I wonder if Engapeth's vertical is increasing with age.
Right. But like Argentina, Facundo Conte and De Checo are gone, which are, again, 2
program staples,
but on the older side.
You know, Italy returning 10 players, Poland returning 8, Serbia returning 8. And this is kind of what we talked about in terms of, you know, you keep those older players along and bring in younger players, and they kind of learn your system and your philosophy. The wholesale changes here for the U.S. on both the men and the women's side, and Canada, it's interesting. It presents a unique set of problems
or
challenges.
You definitely want that overlap.
100%.
In a team sport environment, because even if the older players are kind of past it from a physical perspective, just like having that overlap in the gym creates just a much more seamless transition.
Yeah. Well, if we compare this to professional sports and you had a GM looking at roster management, like, you don't want all your players to leave at the same time. And again, you don't have as much control because players can make their own decisions, but it is something you should be thinking about as you construct your roster year to year. And to see this turnover on both the men and the women's side it's interesting from a planning standpoint of how that's worked out.
Well, and it's like, how often do you see athletes want to kind of be altruistic, for a lack of a better term? Like, how many athletes do you see want to kind of take the time to pass the torch? And it's like, if there's nothing in it for me, like, what am I going to do here? Why would I stay? And I'm not saying that that's what happened here, but it takes a very passionate person who like really loves the sport and is willing to kind of make those longer term sacrifices without the direct payoff to be willing to do that.
Now, that being said, with the senior athletes knowing that the Olympics is in the U.S., I'm going to be... this is the very beginning, and I think we'll have a clearer picture come Worlds and next year as to if anybody is kind of on the fence as to whether they still want to play for another cycle.
I think that the men's situation is slightly different than the women's.
Fair.
In that the men's Paris roster was pretty old. Like, we had a lot of guys in their late 30s. In going through that roster, there were only like 4 names that popped out to me that I was like, they could be back for LA. And that was Taylor Averill, TJ DeFalco, Micah Christensen, and Aaron Russell. All of those guys are, by the time LA rolls around, will be in their mid-30s at that point. I think Christensen will be 35 maybe. So, and he's the oldest. So
there's a pretty good chance we'll see at least some of those guys come back, maybe even for Worlds.
But those were the only 4 names when I was going through the Paris roster that I was like, interesting that they didn't come back for this summer. Interesting that they're taking the summer off, because they are in that age that I think will probably be back. Whereas the women veterans were a little bit younger.
I mean, you could see Jordan Thompson still playing. You could see
Justine Wong-Arantes. You could see Ogbogu. So I think there are more potential athletes from the women's side that will make a comeback versus the men.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So on this roster, we have, as Adam said, 3 returning from Paris, 4 Olympians, period. 11 athletes have competed in previous VNLs for the U.S. 7 have competed for the U.S. in continental events. And then we have 8 brand new athletes to the national team.
Freshies.
Fresh meat, you know. I love that Eric Shoji went back. He's 35, like 36 now, I think.
He's a guy that just loves volleyball.
Yeah.
Like he's infectious. You can't help but just him being in the gym, I think, is amazing for the program.
And I mean, he makes like bank off of volleyball content creation. So like he needs to keep that rolling. You know what I mean? He's like, what am I going to do if I take time off of volleyball for a whole summer? I'm just kidding.
We're going to be missing the TikToks.
Yeah, exactly. But it's nice. That veteran presence, I think, is very important. You do see 8 UCLA or former UCLA athletes on this roster.
Oh, not from Texas? Have we switched schools on the men's side?
Well, Karsh is a UCLA alum. So is Eric Sullivan, but he coached at Texas.
Eric Sullivan hits both the buckets.
Exactly. So, yeah, lots of UCLA, a lot of young guys. We do have a lot of winning experience. Do I think it'll necessarily translate to the international side? Winning in the NCAA does not equate with winning internationally. Let me just say that.
Well, here's my first concern. These guys who are in college most of them are still a little spindly.
Ooh, true, yeah.
I think this is less of an issue on the women's side because you see kind of women mature a little faster, and I think that physical gap from a strength standpoint isn't necessarily as big from, college to professional. But these college guys, they haven't been lifting a ton. They're still a little long. They're not hitting the ball as hard as some of these, we'll call them grizzled vets from some of the other rosters. And my initial instinct is we might see a little kind of boys against men. When I think about...
It's definitely possible.
Even looking at David from UCLA compared to some of his teammates, he is a man, and some of those other guys, they just need a little time to kind of fill out and find some strength within those long frames that are going to be very beneficial down the road. But I think if you line some of those young players up against the Italys, against
Georg
the Brazil,
Grozer.
Yeah, it's going to take some getting used to, and I'm expecting to see a little bit of a physical discrepancy with how young the roster is compared internationally. That's was kind of the first thing that jumped out to me. When we start talking about the men's long list for VNL, I'm not sure that there are many surprises or many snubs. There just aren't as many athletes competing for those spots as there are in the women's side. But I was glad to see, Cameron Thorne get on the roster.
Okay, that surprised me.
You know what? Here's the thing.
Let's just go through position by position here, okay?
Okay, all right. Let's do it.
Okay, so for setters, we have Quinn Isaacson, who played for Ball State. We have Micah Ma'a, as we said, played for UCLA, was in the last Olympics. Andrew Rowan, also UCLA. And Tread Rosenthal, who plays for Hawaii. We also have Michael Wright, who played for Ohio State.
I don't think we're missing anybody that...
you have your setter. You're missing Micah Christensen.
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
That's a given.
Missing Micah Christensen. Micah Ma'a. Okay, he has the Olympic experience. I think good transition without a huge gap.
Correct.
Micah Christensen is absolutely
All
unbelievable.
world.
I'm not talking skill gap here. I'm talking... we have somebody who has experience.
He's been in the gym for 4 years. He understands the program.
Has been playing for great clubs, Final Four this past season with Ankara in Champions League. Okay, and then you also have your transition to the future with Rosenthal and Rowan.
Which I think are the right picks. We'll see where Rosenthal's goes. He's a massive human being in general, so having him, if he develops the ability to run the offense and do that, that's a huge piece. moving forward. Like, you want those two guys. I think Rowan is just super cerebral.
And just technical.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not...
Rowan and Rosenthal need to put on some weight.
Yeah. Well, and this is what we talked about, right? They need to spend the summer with men, understanding how they lift, how they prepare, all of those things, understand the level. But those are good choices to me.
On the outside, we've got Caleb Janess from Ball State. We've got Jacob Pasteur, Ohio State. Cooper Robinson, UCLA. Nolan Flexen, UC Irvine. Ethan Champlin, UCLA. Jordan Ewart from Stanford.
I mean, to be honest, I'm not super familiar with any of those outsides other than the ones who played in college this year. I'm assuming a bunch of them are playing pro overseas right now. That is kind of a question mark to me about how their outside hitting core will be. It'll be
You're
something.
missing TJ DeFalco.
Well,
yeah. Real bad.
Yeah.
And you're missing Aaron Russell.
You got to hope that...
your two guys from Paris are missing.
You got to hope that DeFalco enjoys a month or two off and then is itching to get back into the gym for Worlds, because he makes a huge difference.
Well, I'm pretty sure correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't starting in Paris, and then he came in to a couple matches and just completely turned things around and then kind of solidified his spot.
Yeah, I believe that is accurate. They have to be hoping that he's coming back, and I'm assuming that Karch is having some conversations with him.
Does anybody surprise you?
Again, I'm not as familiar with some of these. Nolan Flexen a little bit. He was a little inconsistent for me this season, but
he got thrown over to the outside part near the end of the season. I felt like he was a more natural opposite personally.
Agreed.
But if they can get him going at 6'11" or 6'10" or whatever he is, he's probably 6'9". The range is there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, I was a little surprised to see him on the roster, but I can see, he's your project, right? Can you teach him how to pass? Can you get him in there? Let's get him into the gym, see what his attitude is like. I know that Karch is very much about kind of attitude and what your habits are and, doing things right. So if he fits that mold and he's willing to work, in my experience, Karch always has time for players who are willing to work and get better. So physically, I think it makes sense.
Cooper Robinson, I think that he will be integral in the future. So I think it's good that he's getting his start now. But they are definitely going to miss those two on the outside this summer.
100%.
On the opposite, we've got Camden Gianni from Grand Canyon, Kyle Ensing, who was the alternate for the Paris Olympics from Long Beach State, Kevin Cobreen went to UCLA and USC, Gabby Garcia, he went to BYU, he is of Puerto Rican origin, Kyle Hobis from CSUN, Zach Rama from UCLA, and that is it.
And they are looking for the next Anderson.
Well, okay, Gabby Garcia played in Italy this year. He is solid. So I think this transition, yes, you have to find a new Matt Anderson. But I think with Gabby Garcia and with Kyle Ensing, I think they've got a solid transition in place there.
Yeah, they're not going to be... I don't think that's going to be a position of weakness for them.
No, Garcia's good.
Yeah, but I also think that the position is up for grabs. So who's going to come in and solidify that spot? And, right now I think it's Ensing and Garcia who are going to fight for that spot. But you've got some interesting young kids coming up as well.
I'm surprised Rama's on the list, to be honest.
Again, I think that there were a lot of looks to the future. I think that... Okay, so let's go back to what we said about UCLA this season, is that they were a little inconsistent. They were a little nonchalant.
I think Rama weighs less than I do, and I'm not a massive person.
Pregnant or pre-pregnant?
Pre.
And so I think when you look at the physical capabilities of a lot of the UCLA players. I think there's potential there. And my guess is that you want to get them into an environment where instead of being kind of the best where they've always been, they're the worst. And they start to understand what it takes to play at that next level. Like if I'm in Karch's shoes, I'm doing the exact same thing. I want those guys who I think have physical potential to compete at the next level to understand what it takes. So I'm not surprised that those guys were included.
In the middle, we've got Jeff Gendrick, who was in the Paris Olympics, went to Loyola Chicago. We've got Shane Holdaway from Long Beach State, Patrick Gassman from Hawaii, Cameron Thorne from UCLA, Merrick McHenry from UCLA, Michael Marshman from St. Francis, Matthew Nig, I don't know, played from Vassar, and Daniel Wetter from CSUN. Oh, and Parker Tompkinson from USC. Okay, you've got one with experience who played in the Olympics in Gendrick.
Correct. And then after that, I don't recognize a lot of those names.
McHenry was first team All-American for the UCLA championships.
Okay.
Like, solid player. Parker Tompkinson, we were like, he has a bright future. He's only going into his sophomore year.
Yeah.
That will be huge just to be in the training environment. Do I necessarily think he will travel? I'll be surprised.
No, the game was a little too fast for him internationally. I think he's going to struggle block wise with that. But again, I like where Karch is at in terms of trying to have some experience, bring in young guys who he sees might have a potential. Like I think overall this is a very thoughtful roster in terms of young players, experience. I'm curious to see how he weaves some of the younger guys into the VNL roster. Is he going to go some rosters all young? Is he going to kind of bring them in, let them play one at a time? I'm curious to see how he manages. Well, he made
sure to hold on to experience.
Correct.
In every single position.
Correct.
I think the only one that's missing is the outside right now. But he held on to a setter with Olympic experience. There's a middle. There are two opposites who have a lot of experience. The libero list, Eric Shoji, staple.
Eric Shoji can help stabilize the young outsides from a passing standpoint, which will help. So I'm curious to see this team. Going back to the middles, I'm glad Cameron Thorne got a chance. I think with the way that he's played so far in his collegiate career, he's earned a shot. You know, I think our concerns are still valid in terms of how he will compete internationally.
What I said.
Yeah, but I think from a work ethic and performance standpoint, as a program, you want to reward those players who do the things that Cameron Thorne does. Is he going to get to play? Maybe not, but acknowledging what he's accomplished so far, I think it sets a good message and a precedent for the program.
Well, Eric Shoji is named the captain, actually, too.
Yeah.
There you go.
Makes sense.
So we got Shoji, Jacob Riley, who played for Pepperdine this past season, Kyle D'Agostino, who played for Stanford, and Mason Briggs, who played for Long Beach State. Yeah, going back to Cameron Thorne, he is a surprise to me. Am I surprised? Jacob Riley showed up in the last half of the NCAA season. I think he definitely deserves a shot. My favorite NCAA liberos were all like freshmen. They were very young, so a little more time for them. But I prefer, even though this roster is very young, I feel like it is more well thought out than the women's roster, because you do have a core group of guys and you have someone who can clearly step up as a leader in each of the positions, because you do break up into positional training like frequently. You have that foundation of at least one guy per position who can kind of hold things down.
And set expectations.
Set expectation. Again, the outside is a little up in the air for me. I think they have potential, but yeah, this construction, like I said, seems more well thought out, even though they're not returning hardly anybody. I'm curious to see how this goes for them. What are your predictions of how this team will do, or who are the main contenders for you for men's VNL this year?
I mean, I think that France is still going to be top dog. I think that Italy is going to be good. Poland is going to be good. Brazil is probably still going to be good.
Bernardinho back at it, baby.
Yeah, you can never count him out. I mean, Argentina will be solid. Serbia will be solid.
So Adam's just listing every single team. So I will break it down and I will say I think it's going to be between Italy and France for the win.
Okay, fair.
Adam's like all the teams that I listed.
Fair enough. I was thinking about the teams that the U.S. is going to have to beat to make the finals. Like they're going to have to beat some of those.
Okay, do you think this American roster will make the final 8?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. But I think it's going to be squeaking in.
All right, the final 8 is in China for men, which
So
China,
final 7.
Yeah. You know, it's not like the Poland situation with women where it's like, nah, Poland is legit. They would likely finish top 8. China's not on the radar for final 8 for men, okay? So we're looking at like, will they make the top 7?
I think they will.
Interesting. You know who I don't think will make the top 7? Canada.
Yeah.
That roster, I am very concerned, okay?
Yeah, well, and again,
I'm Canadian, and I didn't even recognize, like, hardly any of the names.
Vargas on the list.
Skylar Vargas there, okay. But, yeah, I was like,
I mean,
this is not good.
Canada lost Demienko. They lost Marr. They lost
Van Berkel, Arthur Schwartz, Lepke, like, literally... Schwartz was on the right side. Lepke was the left side. Marr was the left side. Demienko was like the middle.
Hogue is not playing.
Hogue is out. Well, I know. I think he should have been out for a while.
Yeah, but from an experience standpoint, I mean, and then they have a whole new coaching staff, you know, which is...
Our Canadian hearts are bleeding looking at this roster. We are not hopeful.
And listen, part of me when I say the U.S. is going to make it is because I think that Karch is an incredible coach. I think he finds a way to motivate his players and to get the best out of them.
Well, when you're like one of the best ever,
yeah,
your players have no excuse but to completely buy in.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like he's some guy that's like, hey, everyone, I'm so happy to be here. He's like, no, I legitimately was the best at beach and indoor.
At everything. And I win wherever I go.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a battle. I think they're going to be fighting for that last spot, but I think they're going to make it.
Oh, baby. We will find out. As we said, the women's VNL starts this week, so we will see. We'll find out who the week 1 roster is for men this week, but they will play next week.
Yeah, I think there's lots of interesting choices and futures ahead for both the men and the women. I'm really excited for the competition to start, to see who steps up, to see who can elevate from college to pro against those different teams, because it's a different level, it's a different expectation, it's a different pressure.
It's a different game.
Yeah, so I'm excited for the summer. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
All right, let's dive into some listener questions. Question 1. If Russia were allowed to play, would they be one of the top teams and favored in VNL and the Olympics?
Yes.
I think on the men's side, yes.
Fair. I mean...
The women were super strong, like, early 2000s. And they kind of... We're always good, but not, like... In recent years, we're good, but not dominant. The men, however, if they were allowed to play, I 100% think that they would be contenders.
You don't think the women would be in the mix?
No, I said that they're, like... good.
Yeah.
Do I think that they would medal? No.
Okay, so the Russian men are very good. So
that's what I'm saying. Like
yeah,
men, I think would medal. The women would be like in the conversation of like making a top 8 or something, but I don't think that they would medal.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's accurate.
Question 2. Do you think most current college players are too young and unseasoned to make the VNL teams? Like, why not have a roster with Izzy Stark, Andy Jackson, Olivia Babcock, Kennedy Martin, Brooklyn DeLay, Tori Stafford, etc.?
I mean, we've kind of already answered this, but we'll say it again. You have program expectations. There's a transition in a process to going from college to pro. You have to learn how to travel. You have to learn how to deal with jet lag. You have to learn how to deal with all of these things that these college athletes aren't experienced to. It's not just about the volleyball. It's about understanding a totally different lifestyle and expectation. And having professionals who have done it before help guide you and mentor you is a big part of making that transition quicker and more successful. And I think that's why you don't just see a college roster going and doing that.
Well, and the other thing is, if you just had a college roster, you would see college volleyball. Having players with international experience, with professional experience, you, in being immersed in those environments, forces you to elevate your game, to learn new tactics, to figure out new tricks and techniques in how to score and be crafty and figure out how to be successful. Having that experience in the gym inherently transforms younger players to make them raise to that level as well. And so I think if you had a roster of just college kids, you'd be seeing college volleyball in the practice gym every day, and they wouldn't get better in the sense of like learning how to figure it out. You would see, high level practices, but you wouldn't see them take that leap to be able to play at the next level.
Well, and I think Nikolov is a prime example of that. He grew up in a professional sport environment. He came and he played 1 year in college, was the dominant player in there, and now is going to go play pro, and he's going to be good, but he's not going to be a difference maker.
He's not going to be the best player.
It's a different level.
Okay, question 3. In previous episodes, you guys talked about needing to go overseas and train with the very best players and teams. But how can USA home grow their players to rise up to that level? How did Italy and Turkey get to be so good in the first place? They paid money to bring top athletes to their leagues.
Well, there's that, but there's a fundamental difference in how they approach athletics at a young age.
Also
and
that, yeah.
That plays a huge role in the 1% of your athletes who are going to play professionally. Like those athletes, they don't go to school. They go to school, but they're training in a professional environment from the time they're 14, 15, 16. Like
there's no club sports.
Right.
It's like if you are identified as a good athlete, you go to high school and then you get sent to train with the pro team.
And until that fundamentally changes in the US, which it won't because you have such a big college experience, you won't see US and Canadian athletes develop at the same rate that European athletes do, because it's not your only job. It's not the only thing you do. And you're not playing, like you're not 14 playing with Nebraska, right? That 14-year-old would be incredible being in that gym every day. It's just not an option here, which is why you see American players and Canadian players generally hit their peaks a little bit later on. And, Love is a great start for that. And you might start to see some young kids coming into those gyms to practice and do that, which I think is the beginning of that transition. But you're missing that experience for the young athletes. And I think that's ideally how Italy and Turkey and the rest of Europe, quite frankly, build their athletes, which is different than North America.
Like you don't see 16-year-olds in North America finish high school and then go train with a Love team. Like the top 1%. They finish their class and then they go play with their own age. In Europe, as Adam was saying, you finish class and you go train with your top team, and then on the weekends you go to compete with your age. Huge difference.
Yeah.
But I will stand by what I said. Even though that system is inherently creating better athletes, those countries in Italy and Turkey also made the investment to bring foreign athletes in, and they made it worth their while to be there. which further increased the level in their gym, which further increased the level of their young athletes, their like domestic young athletes. So they just don't prioritize post-secondary education in the same way that North Americans do. And I am a proponent for academics and education. So yeah, it's a pros and cons for both systems.
Yeah.
Question 4. I was wondering what you guys think about Virginia Adriano going to Nebraska. And then we actually had another question that was very closely tied to this. How are foreign pro players allowed to play NCAA? Because Virginia Adriano has been playing in A2 and I think most recently A1 Italy. I asked some questions about this because I have also been wondering how professionally paid athletes are able to play NCAA. Back in my day, we saw some programs get stripped of their NCAA titles when it came about that athletes on their team had earned money in Europe. Not the case anymore, apparently. So I found out that Italy in particular does not view volleyball as a professional sport. They only declare like basketball and soccer to be true professional sports because there are certain guidelines in Italy that you have to meet and standards to really be qualified. You guys, volleyball's a professional sport, okay? I don't care.
Nonsense.
They might not be official, but these women are making money. I think the NIL has made this very fuzzy.
That's what I was going to say.
She is a professional athlete. 100%. I don't care what anybody says. She might not be making like 7 figures like some of the top athletes out there, but she is making more money than she would ever have as expenses.
She's also not making as much money as Tori Stafford, so who cares?
Well, exactly, and that's the thing is
you're
NIL,
paying athletes to play now anyway.
Yeah, NIL has made this so fuzzy that, yeah, a Tori Stafford or a Kennedy Martin who go and sign these NIL deals are making more than these European kids were making playing professionally. Like these European athletes are very young, so are they being paid top dollar in the countries they're playing? No. But they are pros, but NIL is paying players more. So I think it's hard to argue when that's the case.
Well, and if we're talking about raising the level of a game, like you want those athletes to come over here and play. The Nebraska players will get better playing against her when she's in the gym. Like this is similar to what you see in the European clubs, right? The young players, and not that they're the same college age, but now you have better athletes in the gym. That raises the level. And I agree. If the NCAA players weren't getting NIL money, this is unfair. But now they're being paid to play as well. So what's the difference?
Well, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm willing to bet that Nebraska offered her more than she was making professionally, because otherwise, why would she go? Quite frankly, she was in A1. She had started to make a name for herself. She was playing internationally for Italy. She has no reason to come to the NCAA and pause her professional career unless they were paying her more than she was making professionally, which I would be willing to bet is the case.
Yeah, that's fair. Or she's really smart and she wanted an education.
Given everything we just said about the priority of education, I don't know her. Maybe that's true, but probably not.
Yeah, it'll be that's a good pickup for them though.
Yeah. Thanks so much for these questions, everybody. I say it every week, and I mean it every week. We love them. We love to see what you guys are wondering about and coming up with, so keep them coming.
So let's look forward to the week. Let's highlight a few things. VNL is starting. We've been in a bit of a volleyball lull the last couple of weeks, but my time on the couch is about to increase, and I'm looking forward to it. So VNL starts this week. There's matches going on all day, everywhere in the world. They're all on VBTV, which you can get a subscription online for more than you could before.
At least in the U.S. I don't know what they did to pricing elsewhere in the world, but they've jacked those prices for the U.S., which is shady.
Yeah. So here are the times that you can watch, reasonably in the U.S., but there are matches everywhere. And to be fair, all of the matches are on demand, so you can watch them whenever you want after they've happened. But if you want to watch live, here's a few I would pay attention to.
We picked one match per location for the week of the ones that we thought would, A, the time isn't ridiculous, and B, was a good match.
So Thursday, we've got USA versus Brazil at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's must watch.
I'm very curious.
Yeah. I think these first couple matches for the U.S. on the women's side will kind of set the tone.
Well,
for
they play Italy first.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that result is probably written in the books. But against Brazil with no Gabi and a few other players, I think that should be a decent match. Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern, we've got Canada versus Japan. I'm curious to see.
Very different styles.
Yeah.
But two similarly ranked teams.
So I'm looking forward to seeing that one and seeing what Canada can put on the floor. They got a new coach. They're in Canada, so expectations will be high. Japan is very technical, very fast, very good. So that should be a good one to watch. And then Sunday at 7:30 a.m. Eastern, we got Turkey versus China, which Turkey's coming off a good year minus the Olympics, and China is always good. So
China's got a little bit of turnover, but they're playing at home, and Turkey is bringing back most of their Olympic roster.
Yeah, so
I'm not sure who Turkey actually announced for their week one, though. So,
But that should be a pretty good game. So if you're looking for some volleyball, there's definitely things to watch this week. Those would be our choices. But yeah, let us know what you think as you watch all of the volleyball that's now available.
That concludes this week's episode of Volley Talk. There's always something shaking in the volleyball world, and we hope you enjoyed this little fix. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss any updates, and we'd be so grateful if you'd leave us a 5-star review. You can also find us on Instagram at volleytalk_podcast. If you have a topic that you'd like us to discuss, be sure to let us know by reaching out to us on Instagram or at info@sarahpavin.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week.